We've all heard that saying, you are what you eat. But how true is that when it comes to our brain health, really? Well, today we're going to dive into a huge study from JAMA Neurology that gets right to the heart of that question. Can the food we eat actually protect our minds as we get older? Let's get into it.
And look, the stakes are incredibly high. The projection is that by 2050, a staggering 150 million people around the world will be living with dementia. And here's the thing. The damage often starts long before any symptoms actually show up. That makes early prevention, especially through lifestyle, just absolutely critical.
So, to figure this out, researchers set up a study with a super specific goal. They wanted to compare 6 different, well-known, healthy diets, head-to-head, in one massive group of people. And they wanted to see how each diet performed against both what people felt about their own memory and against actual measured cognitive tests.
Okay, so here's our game plan to really unpack this. We'll start with how the study was designed, then we'll jump into the really exciting results. After that, we'll explore why, and importantly, when, diet seems to matter most, and finally, we'll wrap it all up with the clinical bottom line.
So how in the world do you even start to answer a question this big? Well, it all begins with a really robust study design. The researchers here had access to just a treasure trove of data. They pulled from 3 major long-term studies, which gave them a huge sample size. We're talking nearly 160,000 people who were followed for up to 28 years. That kind of scale over that much time gives the findings some serious statistical power.
And they didn't just look at one generic healthy diet. Nope. They evaluated 6 very distinct patterns. You had things like the alternate healthy eating index, plant-based diets, and of course, the DASH diet. You've probably heard of that one. It stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. It's all about lowering blood pressure with foods like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and lean proteins, while really cutting back on salt, red meat, and sugar. They also looked at diets specifically designed to fight things like inflammation and insulin resistance.
So, how did they measure success? Well, they looked at 2 main things. The primary outcome was something called subjective cognitive decline, or SCD. Basically, this is an early warning sign where a person starts to notice that their own memory and thinking skills have been slipping recently. The second outcome was objective, measured by standardized neurological tests done right over the phone.
All right, so with that incredibly solid design in place, let's get to the part we've all been waiting for. What did nearly 3 decades of data from all of these people actually show us about the link between our diet and our brain?
So the big question is, out of the 6 different diets they put to the test, did one actually stand out from the rest? Was there a clear winner for protecting our brains long term?
And this chart, wow, it lays out the answers so clearly. So this is called a forest plot. All you need to know is that anything to the left of that solid vertical line at 1.0 means the diet had a protective effect. Now you can see that all 6 diets were helpful, but look at the DASH diet. It's the clear standout. It showed the most powerful protective effect by a long shot, which works out to a 41% lower risk of cognitive decline for the people who followed it most closely. That's huge!
Okay, before we get to the next piece of data, we need to quickly talk about something called a Z-score. Now don't worry, this is super simple. Just think of it like a grade on a test, where 0 is the class average. So if you get a positive Z-score, it just means you did better than average. And this is where you can really see the tangible impact. People who stuck closely to the DASH diet also got better scores on those objective cognitive tests. Now, a positive 0.05 Z-score might not sound like a lot, but the researchers did the math. They calculated that it's the equivalent of having a brain that is cognitively about 1 year younger. I mean, that's a real measurable difference.
So what was it about these diets that was making the difference? Well, when they dug in, the analysis was pretty clear. Eating more green leafy vegetables, yellow vegetables, and fish was protective for the brain. And on the flip side, things like red and processed meats, fried potatoes, and those sugary drinks were linked to worse outcomes.
Okay, so the results are pretty compelling. But that just leads to the next questions, right? Why does this work, and when does it matter the most? The study actually went deeper to look at exactly that.
Now this might just be one of the most powerful findings in the entire paper. The brain-protecting effects of the DASH diet weren't just about what people were eating right now. The effect was strongest when people were following the diet during midlife, specifically between the ages of 45 and 54. Just think about that. The choices you're making in your 40s and 50s could be setting up your brain for success more than 20 years down the road. So what's the magic behind the DASH diet?
Well, it seems to be so effective because it tackles 3 key drivers of brain aging all at the same time. First, it helps keep your blood vessels healthy by controlling blood pressure. Second, it helps with blood sugar control because it's low in added sugars. And third, with all those vegetables and fish, it helps lower inflammation throughout the body. It's a multi-pronged attack, really.
All right, let's pull all of this amazing information together and get to the final conclusions, the clinical bottom line. Now, it's always important to look at any study with a balanced view. The strengths here are obvious: the massive size, that super long follow-up time, and repeated diet checks. But there are limitations too. It's an observational study, which means it shows a strong link, but it can't prove cause and effect. And the participants were mostly white and highly educated, so we have to be careful about applying these results to everyone.
So what's take-home message number 1? It's this. The evidence is incredibly strong that sticking to a healthy diet, and the DASH diet is a fantastic example, is robustly linked to a lower risk of cognitive decline.
And take-home message number 2 is all about timing. The dietary choices we make during that critical window in midlife, between about 45 and 54, appear to offer the most powerful, long-lasting protection for our brains as we age.
So this leaves us with a really important question to think about. Our diet is one of the things in our life we have the most control over every single day. So with this level of evidence pointing to a specific dietary approach and a critical time to act, how should this change the way we think about public health and protecting the brain health of our aging populations?